Welcome all to the session on investment opportunities for India in Sri Lanka. Mr. Romesh David, the President of the Indo-Lanka Chamber, will commence this session.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this session especially for Indian investors, a country session for India at the Sri Lanka Investment Forum. We have today a lineup of representatives from Sri Lanka and India and the Honorable Minister, State Minister of Regional Cooperation. To start with, I would like to invite Mr. Vish Govindasamy, Vice Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, to deliver a welcome address. Vish.
Thank you, Ramesh. Ayubowan, Vanakkam, good morning. His Excellency Gopal Bagle, High Commissioner of India, Honorable Minister Taraka Balasurya, State Minister of Regional Cooperation, Mr. Niluka Kadrugamwa, Deputy High Commissioner of Sri Lanka in New Delhi, Mr. Pasan Vanigasekara, DG of the Board of Investments, Mr. Romesh David, President, Indo-Lanka Chamber and CEO of South Asia Gateway Terminal, Ms. Srimati Shiv Shankar, Corporate VP, HCL Technologies, Mr. Manoj Gupta, MD of LIOC, Mr. Umesh Gautam, MD, Lanka Ashok Leyland. A very warm welcome to all of you from the organizers of Invest Sri Lanka India Country Session. In the next hour or so, we have some eminent speakers who will highlight the success of doing business in Sri Lanka and their own experiences. As everyone knows, India being our closest neighbor and a strong trading partner, we greatly value the business, the cultural and social relationship we have with you. With the future developments taking place in Sri Lanka, we invite you to take advantage of the many opportunities we have for investing in Sri Lanka. Thank you once again for your participation, and I look forward to a great session. Thank you.
Thank you, Vish. We next have, to give us a perspective from India, Mr. Niluka Kadrugamwa, our Sri Lanka's acting High Commissioner in India, based in New Delhi. Mr. Kadrugamwa.
Thank you, Mr. David. The Honorable Taraka Balasurya, State Minister of Regional Cooperation, His Excellency Sri Gopal Bagle, High Commissioner for India in Sri Lanka, Mr. Pasan Vanigasekara, Director General Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, Mr. Vish Govindasamy, Vice Chairman, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, distinguished moderator, Mr. Romesh David, and members of the panel, distinguished investors attending this country session, ladies and gentlemen, Ayubowan, Vanakkam, and Namaste. It is indeed an honor and a privilege for me to address you today at this country session on India at the Sri Lanka Investment Forum 2021, the three-day virtual flagship event jointly organized by the Sri Lanka Board of Investment, Colombo Stock Exchange, and the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce. I thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to make a few remarks at this very important country session. I am extremely happy to learn that out of the investors who are attending this first ever virtual investment forum in Sri Lanka, Indian investors constitute the largest number. Distinguished participants, I believe that this is the most appropriate timing to project investment climate in Sri Lanka and to explore opportunities for collaboration when economic recovery has become a top priority for all nations, including Sri Lanka and India, following the severe effect of the global pandemic. As many great Indian companies have already found out, Sri Lanka is a center point for investments in the region. Although Sri Lanka is a market of 22 million people, we are unique in the way that we offer duty-free markets as a gateway not only to the Indian subcontinent, but also to affluent consumers in the European Union. It is well known that Indian enterprises have made use of the India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, which came into force in the year 2000 to set up operations in Sri Lanka. According to the data from Sri Lanka Customs, two-way trade that stood at 658 million US dollars when the agreement was implemented in year 2000 has increased to US dollars 3.6 billion in 2020. India accounted for almost 19% of total Sri Lankan imports in the year 2020. Second biggest source was Sri Lanka and is the third largest export destination for Sri Lanka. In 2020, Sri Lankan imports from India totaled 3,000 million US dollars, while exports to India represented 604 million US dollars. We can bridge this deficit by increased Sri Lankan exports fueled by a higher quantum of Indian investments. India is among the top 5 foreign investors in Sri Lanka. The investments are in the areas of petroleum, information technology, financial services, real estate, telecommunications, hospitality and tourism, banking, tires, vehicle components, cement, glass manufacturing, housing and infrastructure development, etc. Lanka Ashok Leyland, Taj Hotels, Tata, Welcome Hotels Private Limited by ITC Group of Companies, Ambuja Cement, SIAT, Bharati Airtel, Lanka IOC, Nilkamal Plastics, and HCL Technologies are among the large-scale Indian investments in Sri Lanka, which have become household names. In the financial sector, State Bank of India and the Indian Overseas Bank have their presence in the country. In addition, many more other Indian companies have also invested in Sri Lanka. According to the data of the Sri Lanka Board of Investment, we have already seen a sizable increase in approved Indian investments, representing a cumulative total of over 1,732 million US dollars during the past 13 years period. We are very much optimistic that this will continue to increase with large-scale investments in the pipeline, including in the ports development sector. Under the post-pandemic economic revival program, the government of Sri Lanka focuses on economic and strategic engagement to uplift the domestic industry through joint venture collaboration and to increase foreign direct investment flow to Sri Lanka. In November 2020, the government of Sri Lanka presented its budget for the year 2021, which focuses on strengthening the 2021-2023 medium-term program of poverty alleviation and economic revival as envisaged within its policy framework. Among the budget proposals, a consistent tax policy is envisaged for the next 5 years to revive the economy and support several businesses. The simplified tax policies introduced in January 2020 is expected to continue to facilitate taxpayers and make tax administration more efficient. Tax concessions are to be granted for strategic investments. According to the macroeconomic program of Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, the target of the Sri Lanka government is to maintain an inclusive growth rate of 6% or higher over the medium term, a per capita income exceeding $6,500, the rate of unemployment at less than 4%, the rate of annual inflation not exceeding 5%, budget deficit at less than 4% of the GDP, a single-digit trade interest, and also to maintain the exchange value of the rupee at a stable level. To achieve these targets, a plethora of initiatives and opportunities are lined up evolving the sectors as manufacturing, including pharmaceuticals and textiles, construction, tourism, development of agro through advanced technology, fisheries, dairy, information technology, infrastructure, development of highways, ports and airports, to name some. We recognize the importance of foreign direct investment in the development of our economy, and the government has intensified efforts to address the needs of the investors. Sri Lanka offers foreign investors generous incentives across a wide range of sectors, many of these sectors that are of interest to Indian investors. The central facilitator for all FDIs to the country is the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, which is represented at this event. The Board of Investment serves as a one-stop shop to expedite the approval processes and the setting up of investment projects. Distinguished participants, it is my firm belief that the time is very opportune for Indian companies to make use of the opportunities available to expand their business operations in Sri Lanka and enhance profitability under the new normal. In this regard, we extend you a very cordial invitation to come to Sri Lanka, the Asia's next growth haven. From the time immemorial, Sri Lanka and India have enjoyed one of the warmest and closest relationships between any two countries. It is my fervent hope that we continue to strengthen this relationship as we jointly face the opportunities and challenges in the post-pandemic era. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kadrugama, for that comprehensive overview both of trade and also Indian investment in Sri Lanka. I would next like to invite His Excellency Gopal Bagle, High Commissioner for India in Sri Lanka. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, Romesh. Honorable Taraka Balasurya ji, the State Minister of Regional Cooperation. Our colleague, the Acting High Commissioner of Sri Lanka in New Delhi, Mr. Neluka Kadurugama. Our good friend, the Vice Chairman of Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Vish Govindaswamy. Distinguished guests, panelists, representatives from the business and industry, and dear friends. Ayubovan, Namaskar, Vanakkam, and a very good morning to all of you. I would first of all like to compliment the organizers, the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, and the Colombo Stock Exchange on this timely initiative to organize the first ever Sri Lanka Investment Forum, and that too overcoming the challenges posed by the pandemic in the virtual mode. This event reflects the proactive approach of Sri Lanka in pursuit of progress and prosperity of all its citizens, which His Excellency, the President of Sri Lanka, highlighted in his address the day before yesterday. His assurance to support investment creates the necessary backdrop to forge fruitful partnerships for achieving the goal of doubling per capita GDP of Sri Lanka in this decade. And we, as Sri Lanka's closest neighbor and friend, stand ready to respond to this call and to partner Sri Lanka even more closely in this endeavor. The initiatives like this forum and, as I mentioned, overcoming the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic, from which the global economy, as we all know, has suffered a lot, such initiatives assume even more importance, because rising above the challenges and constraints through multiple international partnerships and bringing various stakeholders together with aid of technology is even more essential today than ever before. In this scenario, a session dedicated to economic partnership with India is quite apt, and it reflects the significance and potential of bilateral economic ties in this endeavor. Our colleague Neeluka ji has spoken at some length about the presence of Indian companies, Indian investment, the potential of Sri Lanka, and he has also quoted very useful figures regarding trade and investment, bilateral statistics in that regard. So, and he has given a very good picture. So I will not like to repeat that, but in the context of the resilience of our economic ties, I would like to say that it has been reflected in the volume of our bilateral trade, which has been maintained even in the face of the pandemic. And over the past few years, I would like to stress that the trade has become more balanced in Sri Lanka's favor. There are two specific points which also I would like to highlight in the context of bilateral trade. First is the competitiveness of Indian exports. As we all know, in the last 5 years or so, only about 5% of Indian exports to Sri Lanka have used the benefits of India-Sri Lanka Free Trade Agreement, whereas about 60% of Sri Lanka's exports to India use the corresponding benefits. Progress on economic and technological cooperation agreement, which has been under discussion between both sides, would help in further enhancement of our trade and economic ties. And we look forward to the formulation of the national trade policy by the government of Sri Lanka, which I am sure will contribute to promoting bilateral trade even further. The other aspect which I wanted to mention pertaining to bilateral trade is the resilience. And despite the pandemic, despite a number of constraints, which we all know, being in the neighborhood and close friend and partner of Sri Lanka, that Sri Lanka has faced on its external economic front, despite those challenges and constraints, Indian exporters have been able to keep Sri Lanka's supply lines going in all the key sectors, which include infrastructure and pharmaceuticals. So what it means is that Sri Lankan exports and Sri Lankan business can take even bigger advantage, even more advantage, because of India's integration with global supply and value chains. And this in itself will be a very significant opportunity for Sri Lankan business. If we turn to investment, I would like to note that with the existing and imminently possible investment in certain projects, Indian investment in Sri Lanka would exceed US dollar 2.5 billion. If we add to it the capacities created and livelihoods and lives supported in Sri Lanka by India-Sri Lanka Development Cooperation, part of which it is in grant assistance and part of which through lines of credit, we are looking at another US dollar 3.5 billion through various completed, ongoing, and projects in the pipeline. So these contributions obviously make India and Sri Lanka very close partners in the pursuit of economic progress and prosperity. But now, as we look forward, we have to work together to build an economic partnership for the 21st century. Hence, the High Commission has cooperated very closely, and I'm very happy to see some of our friends who have been very active and very active partners in our pursuit of promoting our economic cooperation. And we have cooperated with them and many others to consolidate inbound investment in existing areas and promote inbound investment into Sri Lanka in those which define the new vistas of prosperity, the new priorities of the government of Sri Lanka. They include ports, shipping, connectivity, logistics, energy, including renewable energy, IT, tourism and hospitality, transport, real estate, health, education, and agriculture, which comprises, of course, food processing, organic fertilizers, and dairy. There are innumerable opportunities in these sectors, and I must mention that the Indian investors are really keen to benefit from a consistent policy framework for bringing in these investments. Greater private sector involvement will be critical for strengthening these ties between India and Sri Lanka. It will also provide a fillip to manufacturing in Sri Lanka in sectors such as pharmaceuticals. Indian business and industry have another advantage when it comes to Sri Lanka, and likewise, Sri Lankan business and industry also share that advantage when it comes to India. It is not only the geographical proximity and historical ties, which again Nilukaji referred to, but also familiarity and the similarities of cultural context. This is a great asset when we wish to pursue a higher level and deeper level and more intensive level of economic interaction. Our long-standing ties with Sri Lanka are probably best suited to partner Sri Lanka in the quest of rapid and sustained growth. In this panel itself, a distinguished panel which we have today for this session, there are a number of representative examples of the focus of Indian companies on Sri Lanka's priority sectors, enhancing capacities and creating employment. Expedited implementation of bilateral investment projects, ladies and gentlemen, will give a boost not only to the Sri Lankan economy, but also to the confidence of Indian investors. And it will also reflect and echo the call with the Honorable Prime Minister, His Excellency Mahinda Rajapaksa ji gave yesterday to make Sri Lanka the destination, the investment destination of choice. As we evolve our partnership for mutual prosperity, it is essential to build suitable models for preserving and promoting our shared maritime environment and also ensuring safety and security as we promote our maritime interactions all around us. The significance of even closer bilateral cooperation between India and Sri Lanka in this regard is brought out even more starkly and sharply by recent incidents such as concerning those MV Express Pearl, and MT New Diamond. I'm very grateful for this opportunity to the organizers to given to me to share my thoughts, even though briefly, and I look forward to stimulating discussions. And I am very grateful, of course, to the distinguished panelists and most of all to our dear friend and distinguished colleague, Honorable Minister of State Tarakaji. I thank all of you for your presence. I thank all of you also for your kind attention. Have a good day. Bahuma Stuti Nadri. Thank you. Dhanyavad.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for those very assuring words, encouraging, I'm sure, encouraging to a lot of potential investors. The High Commission here has always been at the forefront of promoting and facilitating trade, and this has grown under your leadership, so we thank you again. It is next my privilege and pleasure to request the Honorable Taraka Balasuriya, State Minister of Regional Cooperation, to deliver the keynote address for this session. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, David. Aiboan, Welcome, Namaste, and good morning. His Excellency High Commissioner Gopal Bagley, Acting High Commissioner of Sri Lanka, Mr. Niluka Kandurugamuwa, Vice Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Vish Govindaswamy, government officials, representatives of the respective Chamber of Commerce and Industry of India and Sri Lanka, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a great privilege for me to join you in this important session of the Virtual Sri Lanka Investment Forum 2021. And it was with great pleasure that I accepted the invitation to speak at the country session for India. I wish to congratulate the organizers for arranging this forum and particularly this session, which provides an excellent platform for investors from India to interact with key officials in Sri Lanka. I don't believe it is necessary for me to elaborate on the relationship that Sri Lanka and India share. We have cultivated a relationship that dates back millennium, and this special relationship has transcended culture, creed, and religion, and stands as testament to our shared history. The partnership between our two nations have been strengthened through regular high-level visits, including the recent one by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, as well as Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar. Prime Minister Modi's visionary leadership and neighborhood first policy has contributed tremendously to strengthening relationship between our two countries. I'm sure that it will continue to provide greater assistance in the future, and it'll be strengthened in the future. On the economic partnership front, we have jointly forged ahead, deepening our existing framework for cooperation, achieved key milestones, including the Indo-Lanka Free Trade Agreement, signed in December 1998, which was the first of its kind for both our countries. This agreement has contributed to the vibrancy and the growth of our economic and commercial partnership with many Indian private sector companies investing in Sri Lanka. We have also in place a bilateral investment treaty, a double taxation avoidance agreement, and a series of MOUs. Apart from the FTA, we are now looking further to enhance this framework with the proposed economic and technological cooperation agreement. The cross-border investments and trade flow between the two countries is strong and continues to grow. India is Sri Lanka's largest trade partner. Bilateral trade between Sri Lanka and India amounted to $4.6 billion in 2019. India is also one of the largest FDI investors in Sri Lanka. There are large-scale Indian investments in Sri Lanka in the areas of banking, agriculture, petroleum, retail, tourism, manufacturing, IT, among others. I'm pleased to note that similar leading Sri Lankan companies such as Brandix, MAS Holdings, Damro, LTL Holdings have also made significant investments in India. India has been a long-standing development partner of Sri Lanka, and that partnership has been strengthened, especially with the assistance rendered to Sri Lanka by India in its time of trouble. This includes assistance provided to Sri Lanka to combat the prevailing COVID-19 pandemic under India's Vaccine Mantri program, which is deeply valued and appreciated by all Sri Lankans. I believe these strong ties could be further enhanced through several exciting new initiatives that Sri Lanka has launched, which you may find particularly interesting. Let me briefly take you through them. One, I urge all of you to consider investing in special economic zones that are being set up in Sri Lanka, which offer a range of fiscal incentives for investors. These include the special Pharma zone and other SECs in Anuradhapura, Horana, Hambantota, as well as Colombo Port City. India's extensive healthcare industry in particular can find beneficial opportunities in this area. Two, India's motor manufacturing plants could take advantage of Sri Lanka's vibrant rubber industries by using Sri Lanka as a destination for manufacturing of components such as bushers, tubes, and beading that is required for the auto industry. Under the Indo-Lanka FTA, such items can be imported to India under zero duty. Bajaj, Tata, and India's automobiles have been key focus in the transfer of Sri Lanka's transport landscape over the last 2 decades. 3, as you will already know, most of raw materials required by Sri Lanka's apparel industry are sourced from overseas. I urge you to consider setting up facilities in Sri Lanka in the dedicated fabric park that is to be established by the Board of Investments in Eravur, in the eastern province of Sri Lanka. Special incentives will be provided for factory owners who will provide material which cannot be sourced locally. Some of the 4, with recent research showing that salaries in IT sector in Sri Lanka are 75% of salaries in India for similar qualified personnel, there is tremendous opportunity for business collaboration and investment in this sector. Now I know that I am biased, but I think His Excellency the High Commissioner Gopal Bagley will bear with me and perhaps even reluctantly agree when I say that Sri Lankan cities with an educated population, green environment and less traffic congestion provides a better ecosystem for IT industry. Of course, let's not also forget the 0% corporate taxes. HCL Technologies, who are presenting at this forum, will share you their Sri Lankan experience. The importance of this sector can further be stressed by the fact that the minister in charge of this sector remains His Excellency the President. And under his directives, 4 new IT parks are to be established in Galle, Kandy, Kurunegala and Nuwara. 5. Tourism. With accolades such as the Lonely Planet's best destination for travel in 2019, CNN's best places to visit, USA Today's top destinations for winter travel, and 15 islands in the world, best islands in the world, we are expecting resurgence in tourism post-COVID period. As you know, there were over 100 flights operating between Sri Lanka and India per week during pre-COVID era. We should explore possibilities of not just returning to this level of connectivity, but to also consider using this pandemic phase to explore how we can improve on its further enhanced sustainable tourism. Religious, historic and Ayurveda tourism are potential avenues in the tourist industry for investors to consider tapping into. 6. The Port City is Sri Lanka's ambitious program to create a gateway between the island and the world and take advantage of our strategic location to create world-class living and working infrastructure. We urge Indian companies to avail themselves of this opportunity to invest in numerous services that will be required, ranging from financial services to healthcare to education and entertainment. Port City legislation is geared to attract offshore banking and financial services. I urge Indian banks and financial service providers to invest in Port City and leverage the conducive regulatory framework to develop stronger commercial linkage with regional markets. Sri Lanka's educated workforce and the cost advantages provide the required setting in order to compete with offshore financial centers in the world. We also advocate Indian companies to invest in healthcare and educational space around Port City and in the Colombo region. Lastly, as you are aware, the Colombo port serves as a major transshipment hub for India at the moment, and Colombo port will continue to do so for mutual benefit. We are happy that the Hambantota port is also now being used for transshipment of Indian manufactured vehicles. We look forward to the continued growth of this mutually beneficial partnership arrangement for Sri Lanka's ports serving India. The recent agreement with Adani Ports for the development of the West Container Terminal should take this partnership to the next level. I would like to express my appreciation once again to the organizers for inviting me to share my thoughts at this important session, and I hope that this investment forum yields mutually beneficial results, especially for our two countries, and enable our multifaceted partnership to grow from strength to strength. Throughout the course of history, Sri Lanka and India have shared each other's ups and downs. We have been there for each other throughout the good times and bad times. Now I invite you to join with us and as we pursue shared prosperity that will benefit both our countries and people. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Balasuriya, for that very comprehensive overview. Thank you also for pointing out the many advantages to an Indian investor through things like the free trade agreement, which really lend impetus to the natural advantages that anyone would have to serve India over Sri Lanka, given the fact that we are possibly better located or equally well located as any other hub in India. So moving on, thank you also for pointing out the importance of India's tourists to Sri Lanka. They are a large fillip to the tourism industry here, and we look forward, once the resumption of flights in a post-COVID era, we look forward to that resuming, and Indian tourists obviously are the single largest group into Sri Lanka. Moving on, we have coming up a presentation on investment opportunities in Sri Lanka, including regulatory, legal and tax framework by Mr. Pasan Vanigasekara, Director General of the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka. Mr. Vanigasekara.
Good morning, everyone. Ayubowan, Vanakkam, Namaskar, India. On behalf of the Board of Investment of Sri Lanka, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, Colombo Stock Exchange, let me warmly welcome you to the Sri Lanka Investment Forum 2021. Minister, Your Excellencies, I'm extremely pleased to get an opportunity to share some thoughts today at this India session. Sri Lanka and India have had thousands of years of history, trade and commerce, and we felt that it was apt that we had a India-specific session. Many of you have experienced how mesmerizing Sri Lanka and its hospitality can be, but its beauty runs deep. Let me introduce you to the hidden gem of Asia, a land of growth and opportunity. Let me explain why so many multinationals have chosen Sri Lanka for business, such as IOC, Ashok Leyland, and how these fundamentals make Sri Lanka Asia's next growth haven. Post-war, Sri Lanka has seen a rapid GDP growth despite recent challenging years. Country is at an inflection point with USD 4,000, around USD 4,000 per capita GDP, which is roughly thrice the South Asia average. With the right policy orchestrations, this is when typically economies take off. The next wave of rapid growth is expected in South Asia and East Africa, strategically placed in Sri Lanka to take leverage of the growth opportunities. International ports and airports, as you know, are the gateways to the world. With 5 world-class gateways, Sri Lanka is a transshipment hub, fast becoming the epicenter of South Asia. Sri Lanka's non-aligned policy enables us to trade with all its South Asian neighbors without any hindrance, providing access to close to over 3 billion consumers from one strategic location. It's an oasis for skills-based living environment in South Asia. We have an extremely educated and trainable, capable workforce, digitally savvy, 46%, and 30% computer literacy rate, and one of the highest youth literacy rates in the world, almost 100% universally. On the other hand, it's an island of charm, a great place to work, live, and enjoy life. We have something for everyone, be it business or leisure. We have been recognized and frequently rated as #1 as the most livable city and highest quality of life in South Asia. Sri Lanka aims to achieve a sustained GDP growth of 7+% and exports and service income earnings of 30 billion by 2025. The government has embarked on an educational reforms to align to future talent needs, and also taken measures to increase the quality of graduate output by 3 times. Sri Lanka will continue to maintain its liberal investment policies, including earnings and repatriation without hindrance, and hidden taxation or constraints. It has been long since Sri Lanka diversified from its traditional exports of tea, rubber, coconut, and apparels. Foundations to doubling GDP over the next decade are multifold, which would enable the country to capitalize on its fundamental KSPs and take advantage of economic tailwinds. Let me take one by one and explain some of these catalyst sectors, starting with manufacturing. BOI companies account for 85% of industrial exports. While supporting existing industries to expand, BOI is also looking to orchestrate and help several key manufacturing sectors to take root in the country to enable to each an incremental 1 billion in export revenues or import substitutions by 2025. Let me take you through one by one such manufacturing sectors. Pharmaceutical zone. A state-of-the-art 400-acre pharmaceutical zone is being built, joining the Hambantota port and the international airport there, with easy access to sea and air logistics. The environment and other pre-approvals for the zone allow various types of drug manufacturing, from APIs to generics to oncology, and thereby reducing setup time significantly. Generous tax breaks up to 10 years plus customized incentives are offered for larger investments. Next, we are building up a dedicated textile fabric zone. As you know, Sri Lanka has a vibrant apparel sector industry, raking in over 5.5 billion in annual exports. A ready market opportunity is available of up to 1 billion with minimal movement costs from factory to end customer. We hope to achieve increased supply chain resilience and agility to cater to greater demands of the manufacturers and buyers. Next, what I would rank as a very important aspect, which is Sri Lanka as an ICT hub. It's dubbed as the island of ingenuity. Sri Lanka coders provide multiple stock exchanges. It powers multiple stock exchanges, boardrooms, banks, theme parks, and many other critical entities, even those including in India. The India Plus One story is a very credible one here, as the world looks for redundancy partner for ICT BPM India. India, as you know, is the ICT hub or the back office of the world. And the India Plus One story has become more credible in this post-COVID era, especially because Sri Lankan ICT firms have been able to provide almost 100% undisrupted services during the pandemic. So let me invite global players such as HCL, who have set up recently in Sri Lanka and expanding rapidly to take up this opportunity to further strengthen the India ICT story. Let me also remind that as the minister also mentioned, the sector attracts zero corporate taxes for ICT companies. Next, tourism. I'm sure most of you have visited this island paradise. Whether you are a sun, sea, or sand seeker, or love the 2,500 years of heritage that we have shared, or into wellness, wildlife, or cuisine, Sri Lanka offers something unique to your heart's desire. It is that's what makes us so Sri Lankan. This creates investment opportunities in the hospitality sector, especially in the world-class hotels, medical tourism, and wellness, in theme parks, etc. As you are aware, breakout sessions and sector sessions will provide you in-depth look at these opportunities. Let me also touch upon the strategic enablers, which will lay the foundation for the pillars on top of which our economy will grow. As you will see on the screen, at the bottom of the screen, there are the low cost of doing business, ease of doing business, and the low risk of doing business. As a pro-development administration, many steps have been taken to improve the country's competitiveness and future readiness. Many initiatives are underway to improve cost competitiveness, including tax policy consistency, and above all, a stable government in place. Operational streamlining over the last 12 to 18 months should move us 15 to 20 notches up the ease of doing business rankings. Let me assure you, at the highest echelons of government, it is appreciated that we need to move further up the rankings. And the firm plans are afoot to make further changes so that Sri Lanka will land firmly in the green zone, the top quartile, perhaps within the top 25 to 30 ease of doing business destinations globally by 2025. Let me move on to low cost of doing business. The government has broadly outlined 5-year policy consistency with respect to tax structure, giving much needed certainty for investors beyond the industry-leading tax incentives. Sri Lanka offers one of the lowest productivity adjusted labor costs across all segments. It is far more loyal. The labor pool is far more loyal, and salary inflation is by far one of the lowest in the region. Tax-free capital goods importation, reduced startup costs and running costs, combined with labor cost and location advantage, provide investors a compelling investment value proposition. Thirdly, the high ease of doing business. There is an appreciation at the highest, as I mentioned, there is an appreciation at the highest echelons of power, the need for improving ease of doing business. As I mentioned, many initiatives have been already taken, which should take us 15 to 20 notches up the rankings. Legal and tax reforms, administrative bottleneck clearing, streamlining application and approval processes should move us to the top 20 to 30 over the next 4 to 5 years. In fact, I hosted a special segment on these reforms just yesterday, and I invite you to go back to the schedule and at your leisure view this segment, which will give you further details of the initiatives that have already been implemented and those that are in the pipeline. So, in summary, let me emphasize, we are set to double our GDP over the next decade. We have 6 thrust sectors to propel the economy. We offer an investor-friendly business environment. So how can the BOI help? As the Apex Investment Promotion Agency, we will help you make the best of this opportunity and provide end-to-end facilitation to help you set up in the shortest possible time and get the best fit incentives and run your operations smoothly. That's it from me. Aibowan, Wanakam, and Namaskar. We warmly welcome you to Sri Lanka, Asia's next growth haven. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Pasan. I think we move into the next phase of this session. We have with us 3 very, very eminent and high-profile and diverse investors on the panel. Joining us from India, we have Srimati Shivashankar, who's Corporate Vice President of HCL Technologies and HCL's lead on the Sri Lanka investment. Welcome, Srimati, to the panel. On my right, we have Umesh Gautam, who's probably one of the longest-serving Indians in Sri Lanka, been here for close to 4 decades. Umesh is Chief Executive of Ashok Leyland, of Lanka Ashok Leyland. And on the far right, we have Manoj Gupta, who's one of India's state investments in Sri Lanka, heads Lanka IOC, a subsidiary of Indian Oil Corporation, and a public listed company in Sri Lanka too. Before we move into it, before I address our panelists, I'd like to also inform the audience that the panel here and Srimati are open to receiving questions via the chat box on your screens. So please feel free to address anyone here, including the Honorable State Minister and Pasan, if you have any queries. We have one question so far, which I think has already been answered quite comprehensively by Pasan's presentation. So if I may start with the most senior of our investors, seniores priores. Lanka Ashok Leyland has been one of the earliest investors in Sri Lanka through its subsidiary, Lanka Ashok Leyland. Gautam, given your decades of experience here as an investor, employer, and major manufacturer, plus one of our primary suppliers of buses and trucks, could you give our viewers an overview of what has worked well and what, if anything, could be better?
Good morning. Let me first thank the event organizer for putting together this session and inviting me to share my experience as an investor, as an employer who has experience more than 35 years in Sri Lanka. Romesh, answering your question to begin with, I have to be very clear. As my experience 80s, 90s, and until 2009, when the peace prevailed in the island, has vastly different. Ashok Leyland has a presence in Sri Lanka since 1970, and considering the close proximity to India, excellent relationship between India and Sri Lanka, and acceptance of Indians and Indian goods, Ashok Leyland decided in early 80s to invest in Sri Lanka. That time it was a very young economy, and investment is still being debated because that time it was a GDP around below $4 billion. And 1982, we have formed a joint venture with government of Sri Lanka and Ashok Leyland India. And beauty of the joint venture is this: Ashok Leyland has only 27% stake in the joint venture, while the majority is held by government of Sri Lanka and the Sri Lankan investors. So this is 73% owned by Sri Lankans. So that is the Indian investment, and this investment has a clear objective from government of Sri Lanka side. During those days, government wanted to develop the local industry, to create employment opportunities to Sri Lankans, and less dependence on foreign suppliers. And Ashok Leyland objective was there to enhance further our footprint in Sri Lanka and to make this joint venture Lanka Ashok Leyland as an export base for exporting Ashok Leyland vehicle to the region, Asian region. Unfortunately, 1983, major disaster started, which continued 30 years. During those days, focus of government was only to resolve the ethnic conflict. There was no focus on development. We have done investment in Sri Lanka. 1986, I have been posted from North India, from Delhi, as a young graduate engineer with no clarity, total uncertainty, to review the investment which India has done in Sri Lanka. See, Indian investors have the ethics. When they invest in a country, they never leave. So we have no option to continue with this. Unfortunately, 86, 87, 88, conflict has been shifted to south also. We suffered a lot. And Lanka Ashok Leyland has a large, huge investment. Not only investment, we have a large workforce. And to provide continuity of those workforce was a question. So what Ashok Leyland has decided, and we change our business plan, we become manufactured service provider. And Ashok Leyland has given contract to Lanka Ashok Leyland to undertake the service to overseas market. We developed a state-of-art training center in Sri Lanka, where we got the talent from the Sri Lanka, trained them for servicing of vehicle, start sending from here. That was first time Lanka Ashok Leyland start getting foreign revenue. It really worked well. It was most profitable. 2009, when peace prevailed, we wanted to take a maximum share of the peace dividend. We invested again, and again started assembly locally in Sri Lanka. And since then, Lanka Ashok Leyland is a success story in Sri Lanka. And I would like to highlight to investors, though Ashok Leyland has only 27% stake in this company, government allowed Ashok Leyland to have the management control, and they value the investors, the talent, and there was no interference from their side. And during hardship, this long hardship, government and the local investors supported the joint venture. On a personal note, I have been in Sri Lanka since 1986, almost 36 years. I have had a great recognition in Sri Lanka. This is my second home, and country has offered the quality life which one expatriate looks in when you come to foreign posting. It has been given. Not only the government of Sri Lanka and local companies have recognized the talent, and I have been appointed director in a number of companies. Reason by sharing all these things to investors, that country value the talent and recognize them. And to sum it up, Ramesh, your question, I would like to say Ashok Leyland, now with the new government, there is political stability, there clarity, want to develop local industry. Ashok Leyland India has again invested heavily in a state-of-art manufacturing plant in Sri Lanka. The vision which we had initially to make it a base for export is getting true after almost 40 years. And as far as I am concerned, this is my second home. I would prefer to have my retired life in Sri Lanka. If your government permits, give me the visa. With this note, I want to say, investors, what investor looks in a country, all expectations have been met, willingly, supportingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Umesh, for those very, very wholesome and I think fulsome endorsement from clearly an investor and an investment that has been as resilient as Sri Lanka has been over the last 35 years. So thank you for that. If I can next move on to Manoj at Lanka IOC. In terms of size and scale, LIOC is one of the largest investments, Indian investments in Sri Lanka. It's public listed, as we talked about earlier, and it's also a public-private partnership with the state-owned CPSTL, Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals Company. Could you share your experiences as a strategic service provider in partnership with a government-owned entity, a state-owned entity?
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Ramesh. Thank you so very much for giving us this opportunity, in fact, to express ourselves. In fact, I, on behalf of Lanka IOC, would express our utmost level of happiness and satisfaction. In fact, we have been here for the last 2 decades. In fact, we came down in 2002, and since then there has been no looking back. In fact, whatever aspirations, milestones that we had for ourselves, we are more or less on targets. I mean, we have a very committed workforce comprising of all the locals out over here. In fact, there are only a few expats who come from India. The complete company is managed with the local Sri Lankans out over here. Like even on the board of directors, we have the eminent personalities from our country. Mr. Ramesh, you asked us about our experience. Like, you know, we are on the board of CPSTL, Ceylon Petroleum Storage Terminals Limited. In fact, this is the only government company, the terminaling company, which is primarily concerned with the complete storage and distribution of the petroleum products. In fact, they harness the complete potential at Kolanava, Mathurajala, and the upcountry 11 locations. In fact, they have a tankage of close to almost 4,000 metric tons, and we are putting up additional tanks at Kolanava and Mathurajala. Now, what makes me say all this is we are on the board of CPSTL. Like, in fact, 1/3 ownership is there of Lanka IOC. So as such, we are regularly participating, you know, every month in the board meetings of CPSTL, which are there we have the chairmans, the MDs of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, the biggest energy company out over here. We have officials, representatives from the Ministry of Energy. So that is one platform where we are taking the most crucial decisions with respect to enhancing the energy cover. For example, the energy cover for the country right now stands for 21 days. Like, if it was not for any imports, we are self-sufficient for 21 days. But going by that, those decisions are being taken. Now, 9 tanks, can you believe me, 9 tanks at an outlay of almost $18 million are under construction at Kolanava, and another 3 tanks at Mathurajala. So this is going to just enhance the energy cover by another 10 to 12 days. The complete modernization, the complete automation of Kolanava is under progress. All the requirements of the fuel oil, are met by the Sapugeskanda refinery. A feasibility study is being now carried out for setting up 100,000 barrels per day additional refinery so that we can be more self-sufficient. So what I'm trying to say is, like, though we are a private entity, yet we are completely engrossed in the so committed decision making for our country. We feel blessed. We feel actually very, very, very privileged on that front. I mean, like you name it and we are there. I mean, say for instance, recently, like CPC got into bunkering. In fact, that was a decision taken so as to have the bunkering, the bunker fuel offered to the players, the private entities, at a more economical rate. So it's like that, like SPM. that SPM, the buoy mooring, which is almost about 6 nautical miles offshore, where we are receiving the consignments. Underground pipelines are there that straight away discharge it to the Mathura Jawla terminal. Talking about the pipelines, we are in the process of replacing the existing 10 inches pipeline with 14 inches pipeline, which is going to be playing a pivotal role in decreasing the discharge time. Like contrary to almost presently we take about 96 hours, it would be reduced to almost 72 hours. So those are the decisions, not only the decisions, in fact, physical implementation, the exercise, the physical work has actually got started. So that is where we are, with lots of potential, lots of opportunities coming up to our way. I mean, we really, as I said, we really feel privileged, right, out over there in a country like Sri Lanka. Like.
Thank you, Manoj. Lots of good news stories. Thank you. Last but not least, certainly, coming to Srimati in Chennai at the moment. HCL is a new and groundbreaking investment from India that is growing exponentially from the word go. Could you elaborate a little bit on the journey so far and the plans you have for the immediate future? Srimati.
Yeah, thank you, Ramesh, and good morning to all the dignitaries on in the call today, and also all the guests who have joined us. So HCL, in a way, is the youngest to join, and thank you for also making me feel young today, Ramesh, by allowing me to speak last. So we started our due diligence somewhere in towards the end of 2019, October, November of 2019. And in January of 2020, we actually signed up the MOU with BOI. So that basically says how collaborative the environment is in Sri Lanka for us to move forward to set up any new business. So for any new investors who's looking at a new country and say, what is that the country will do in order for me to move forward, which is the first step of sealing the pact with the Board of Investment and setting up a company. I think Sri Lanka really demonstrated the turnaround was only about 90 days. It was actually 90 calendar days and not working days. So that is something I really have to acknowledge this in this forum. And like Pasan said before, it is not only a +1 site for IT. I would call it as a buddy site for India. And it's also a great BCP site for India and for any of the South Asian countries, which is looking for an alternate country for growing IT. So we are probably the only country, His Excellency Bagley, you will know that we are the only one company we have been growing through the pandemic. We actually built HCL during pandemic. So if we talk about resilient, if we talk about what is that focused strategy can do in a new country, I think I'm very grateful that HCL gave me an opportunity, and then we started to work collaboratively with various vendors. And also, we were able to get our customers. As you know, our customers are largely the Fortune 500 and the other 2,000 large companies globally. They also didn't think twice about moving to Sri Lanka. So basically, the Sri Lanka positioning in terms of talent, in terms of resilience, in terms of as a BCP site, to a large extent is also well known to our customers. So in January, we signed the MOU, and then we started our work. And actually, we got our site up in September, and we launched and inaugurated our site, our development center. It's really a state-of-art global delivery center in September. In fact, the Prime Minister was also there to inaugurate the location. And then from there, when we actually exited in March, I'm extremely happy to tell you I've added more than 500 employees, and they're all locals, and they're all local engineers as well, both freshers as well as experienced people. So if we grow at pace, the 3,000 target that we have set for ourselves and what I have committed to the Board of Investment, I don't think it's going to be very far away. So I think, I've been saying the 3C framework is on which I have built or we are working on HCL, to be operating out of Sri Lanka. The first one is the capability. That's largely the talent, which even the Honorable Minister in the group spoke about. We have really young talent that we need to nurture. The second would be the capacity with all these IT parks, the infra support, more telecom companies coming in, and also some of the brightest Indian IT companies also, which would extend its network here. I don't think bandwidth or network that is important for the IT companies from the infrastructure will be a question. So the second is the capacity which we have to grow. And one of the things I think got missed in this discussion, which I also want to emphasize, is how the new government is focusing on education. The new of universities and focus on STEM education. I think that's going to make a big difference. So capacity from talent perspective is possible. The third is the collaborative environment with all the stakeholders, and of course, signing the MOU in 90 days and setting up the development center within the first 6 months, and that too during the pandemic. I think I think these are some of the very important milestones any new investors, especially from the IT, would look for. So I also take this opportunity to thank all of you, because without your partnership, this wouldn't have been made possible. Back to you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Srimati. Yes, I think the Honorable State Minister was saying the same thing about capability building a little while ago. So I think HCL, you will find a lot of endorsement and a lot of support from the government. Going back to Umesh, Umesh, can you tell us, in terms of what advice would you offer to a potential new investor from India, particularly in the industrial manufacturing and service space and trading space?
Right, Ramesh. Today, I think that what I can say to Indian investors, the need of the hour is totally different. Let's not go in race of big financial investment. What we need is the investment focused on the social economic development of Sri Lanka. Pandemic, number of migrant workers have come back to Sri Lanka. Being an investor here, I would like that welfare of the community, and today corporate sector should come forward and create an avenue to provide employment, because these people, 67,000 migrant workers have come to Sri Lanka without, and we should not simply look on government to provide jobs. That corporate sector be responsible. So my suggestion to India, that whatever investment comes like HCL is an example. Today, in terms of money, it's not big, but it will create employment opportunity to thousands. We have Infosys, we have Wipro. I mean, what I suggest that I think government of Sri Lanka as well as government of India should help Sri Lanka at this moment, try to get those type of investors in Sri Lanka who can create the job opportunities for the locals. And we don't wish our workers, our young generation to go to Middle East, to go to countries, work there. Why do they go there, leave their family here? So there are no opportunities. And second, my advice to Indian investors, especially manufacturers, Sri Lanka is a small country with population of 22 million, but offer a greatest opportunity. And that opportunity is next door neighbor is a giant with 1.4 billion population. So if they come to Sri Lanka, they should come with a clear mindset. They manufacture Sri Lanka, but mainly they should make for India, which has a demand. And later on, they make things for Asian region and utilize the benefit of FTA, which Sri Lanka has with number of countries. which is not possible from India. By this type of investment coming in Sri Lanka, will create a lot of job opportunities. We have Indian CEO Forum, Ramesh, you must be knowing, where I'm the president. In this pandemic, we thought, let's behave responsibly. Indian CEO Forum launched a project, Shine Lanka, which we are marketing with the help of BOI. BOI was very supportive. We marketed in India to bring that type of investment. They need to get universities from India. They need to get management institutes from India. The amount of students go to foreign countries is a drain of foreign exchange that can be saved for country. So I may differ with the people, but I still feel at this moment, Indian investors should play. See, India has been the largest and oldest investment in Sri Lanka. We have moral responsibility to support the country at this moment. And through Shine Lanka project, we are marketing Sri Lanka and India mainly to get the technical institutes which can provide technical skill. We want to develop more entrepreneurs and call centers, IT companies. Though it will not be big in investment, but it will solve the need of the society which we need today. Second, trading. India, Sri Lanka has a lot of unorganized trade. And as you all know, country is going through foreign exchange crisis. Import has been banned. And again, any import has to be on 1 year credit, 6-month credit. There is no hedging allowed. There is no forward booking. So it is not the right time for traders to come here. This is the right time to investors who should create, who should help social economic development of Sri Lanka. I think that's my view.
Thank you, Umesh. If we can move to Manoj, it's a tough time to be an oil man in a global oil major at this moment in time. But given Sri Lanka's economic backdrop with the restriction on imports and also the really aggressive emission targets both nationally and globally, what is LIOC doing in order to address some of these issues?
Thank you, Mr. Ramesh. In fact, in line with the policy statements of our Honorable President, His Excellency, Vistas of Prosperity and Splendor, by 2030, we have a target to come over to renewable energy by as much as 70%. So in line with that, we have started taking leaps, we have started taking calls, decisions, like we started solarization in a big way. We have started carrying out the solarization of all our petrol sheds. We have close to almost about 215 sheds. We carried out solarization for about 30 sheds last year. We are carrying it out for almost about 45, 50, and we have a target that within maximum of another 2 years, we would be 100% solarizing all our sheds. Now, this works in a very good way. Not only does it meet all the energy requirements which is required at the shed, but whatever excess that you generate, that is given to CEB, Ceylon Electricity Board, or LECO, and you fetch revenue for that. You fetch revenue at a very handsome amount of 22 rupees per unit. Believe it, like out of those 30 sheds that we have solarized, that is tuned to the extent of about 500 kWp, we are fetching almost about 1 million revenue on monthly basis. So that is one big call that we have taken. Coming to EV charging stations, with the type of population of the cars that we have, like fine, like there are restrictions on imports, but going forward, we are very, very hopeful. I mean, as we all very, very know, we are very strong on that. Our resilience is very strongly in a positive way talked about. Imports going forward are going to be started. We have started coming up with EV charging stations at all our sheds. We have almost set up 5, 6 of them last year, and we intend to add up to our strength. we are selling branded fuels. Now, branded fuels, for example, LP95, for example, LSD, the 10 ppm. In fact, like that is the call out over here in our country that more and more patronization of the branded fuels is being done. Like what happens in this case is that the percentage of sulfur in the fuel is reduced so that emissions, the quality of the emissions is also controlled. The pollution effect of the emissions on the environment is also taken note of. Like we have gone ahead with the setting up of a grease plant, which is going to be coming up at an outlay of almost about 400 million in about a month's time from now. And I have DGBOI sitting next to me. We would like to extend our sincerest gratitude to them. In the last 1 year, like when we had only the Vande Bharat flights and the exclusive Sri Lankan Airlines flights operating, they were the first ones to give us all the approvals and clearances that we could fly the exclusive manpower from India to attend to the setting up of this plant. Irrespective of all constraints, like whenever we approach them, we have the brotherly support in terms of right away, clearance and guidance to us. All our shipments, like from Navashava, from Mumbai, irrespective of all lockdowns, in fact, we could bring in all those consignments on time. So that is what our country is. Like we are there. I mean, fulfilling our objectives are what we have in mind. To answer you.
Thank you, Manoj. Very emphatic. Thank you. We are coming close to the end of our session, but I'd like to end with Srimati again. You talked about the growth you've had, Srimati, and your very ambitious plans in terms of where you want to end up. So attracting and creating that young talent is crucial to the success not only of HCL's operations here, but also the growth of the industry and that business in Sri Lanka. Could you tell us a little bit about what you are doing and what your plans are in order to achieve this level of scalability of capable people?
Sure, Ramesh. So, IT, we are completely reliant on knowledge and skill sets of people who join us. And in an IT industry, you don't need to be an engineer to take up IT as profession. We all know that because the way the two and the way that we are building applications or products these days, you don't necessarily need to be an engineer as well. So it is very important that when a company like us come into Sri Lanka, we are not just looking at the fresher talent, but also people who have experience in new age and relevant technologies in the coming years. There are certain experiences and insights that I have, and I thought it's important to share. Number one is, of course, we have freshers, but freshers do we have in large numbers? Are we producing enough STEM based graduates in Sri Lanka? Today, unfortunately, no. On an average, we look at about a 20-30% of our workforce to be freshers. That's like maximum. So if you're looking at about a 1,000 or a 2,000 workforce, you're looking at about 600, 700 freshers to be given year on year to a company like HCL. Even our absorption can be any number. So instead of recruiting big numbers in India or Philippines or any other country, I would prefer Sri Lanka if I have enough young, ready to absorb talent which is coming out of colleges. Today, that is not there. That's something that we need to look at. So what we have started doing is to work on the concept of in-school grads and also a program called Tech B, where A-level complete students, we skill them and then we take them as for level IT jobs. Please note, we are not doing any BPO in Sri Lanka. These are clearly they're IT focused. So we take them in the entry-level IT jobs and then provide a work-integrated higher education. So since we have Minister also here, my humble submission is, if you have to scale and if you think scale, we will have to have work-integrated higher education model. And the pandemic has taught that you don't need a brick and mortar for students to come and get educated. If we have good infrastructure, people can log in from home. And if they continue to work even for the next few months, and when you have to win over the turns once the inflection point of post-pandemic comes, it's the volume and the quantum of the freshers that Sri Lanka can supply can actually attract a lot of other IT companies anywhere from the world. It has to be more a pull rather than a push. And for us, it's the capability and capacity to scale really matters when we have to come into any new country. The second aspect is the what I would call as experienced IT engineers in the country. Experience is there, but do they have awareness, or have they ever have any experience in the new age technologies, digital skills? To some extent, we don't see that. So many people whom we take, we also invest in a delta skilling. So as much as the country wants to focus on education, I think you must start focusing on work-based skilling. These are job skilling. And it's a right chance for us to also repurpose those who are not in STEM. There are a whole lot of people in arts, history, and commerce background. They can easily get repurposed. Repurposing people from a non-STEM into IT is very much doable, which at SEAL we have been doing even in many locations. Yeah, itself. And if you don't do that, person you were talking about the various IT hubs. If large companies like me have to work on a satellite model between Colombo and a new economic zone, new IT economic zone, like a hub and spoke kind of a model, then we need talent, not only fresher talent, but also experienced people in these locations. So for that, the job-based skilling should also get started immediately in many of the smaller towns.
Thank you, Srimati. I think, thank you very much. We have run out of time. I'd like to thank you for joining us and thank all the others who joined us online.